Good afternoon. Today I'm going to be reviewing the Ball Roadmaster M Model A. This watch is available from ballwatch.com for €6,795. Ball Watch Company have a rich brand heritage. They were founded in 1891 in Cleveland, Ohio, America, and their watches are now made in Switzerland. This piece is a limited edition of 333 numbered pieces, and the M Model A is available in two versions, Rainbow and Classic respectively. This is the Classic version. So to clarify, both the Rainbow and Classic versions have 29 microgas tubes which are lumed with tritium. The Rainbow version has 29 rainbow coloured tubes. This Classic version has 29 green and yellow tubes respectively. So firstly, let's look at the watch case that the watch comes in, and then I'll talk you through the specifications of the piece. Now, to clarify, Ball sent me this piece directly and it's a review sample, so rather than sending it in the watch box you'll receive if you purchase the watch from ballwatch.com. Often watch reviewers receive pieces in hard-shell travel cases like this, but nonetheless they've printed the lid with Ball official standard, the brand emblem since 1891, the foundation of the brand, and the brand motto, accuracy under adverse conditions. But I'll show you the interior nonetheless. So interior is upholstered with nylon fabric, and inside there's a block of foam with a disc that can be removed from the block, and the watch sits upon the disc inside this block, and it does a good job of protecting the watch in shipping. And this is often how watch reviewers receive pieces from brands as an alternative to the watch box, or alternatively watch roll that the collector will receive. Now they've also included this aluminium torch which has a knurled shank, and they've branded it with Ball, as you can see, and this is a UV LED torch similar to the UV LED torch I use, albeit mine has 100 UV LEDs, so I'm going to be using that for the lume test. Now strictly speaking, the 29 microgas tubes used in this piece, which are powered by tritium as the exciter, they're not charged in the same way with ultraviolet light as per superluminova such as C3 or BGW9, but however you can excite the potency of the exciter, the tritium exciter, using ultraviolet light. So we'll do that. One also gets this plastic tag which is branded with Ball and the brand emblem and official standard watch. Also, it has a cardboard tag with the same again and the brand motto. On the reverse it has the barcode and the full reference time of the piece, which is the M Model A version of the Roadmaster, and this is the Classic version as I've detailed rather than the Rainbow version. So with regards to the specifications of the piece, we have a 41mm case diameter. However, the thing to note is there is a bezel overhang. The bezel is larger diameter at 43.5. So, although the case is 41, it looks and feels more like a 43 piece because of the bezel being 43.5. So 2.5mm of extra diameter on the bezel. We have a lug-to-lug measurement of 48.5mm, but however, again there's something to note, because the case lug-to-lug is 48.5, just 0.5mm above the 48 sweet spot, but the effective lug-to-lug is actually more like 54.3, because this uses 20mm end links in the H-link bracelets, but they're rather like integrated end links because they have screw bars versus using stainless steel spring bars. So you can see, due to the profiling of the end link in the H-link bracelet, it extends the case lug to lug, which is 48.5, to an effective lug to lug of 54.3. So I'm going to base the lug to lug measurement on the effective lug to lug, which is 54.3, larger than the 48.5 actual lug to lug of the case. We have a thickness of 15.5mm and a lug width of 20mm. The bracelet is flared and tapered, so at its widest point it's wider than the 20mm lug width. It's 24mm at the lugs, tapering down to 18mm at the 2-button push butterfly clasp. Clasp is signed with the Ball logo with high definition engraving. 2-button push triggers are brushed satin finish on the left and the right hand flank and correctly proportioned. We have a boxed double dome top hat crystal with clear AR coating on the underside, and the clear anti-reflective coating does an outstanding job of reducing the glare and the highly reflective nature of the silver mirror polished handset, the silver mirror polished Arabic numerals at 12, 9 and 6, and the silver mirror polished applied indices. So, box top hat crystal adds 2mm thickness to the piece, and I think they've made a mistake here because this is a very thick piece, it's very top heavy, it's 15.5mm. It's largely due to the 2mm thick box top hat crystal. Now, one has to appreciate this is a 4-hander piece. We have an hour, minute and second hand, which is 3 hands, plus a GMT hour hand, which is skeletonized in red, that's a 4th hand. So therefore, there is a taller hand stack height than a 3-hander piece. One has to be magnanimous about that, but however, it doesn't need to have such additional clearance beneath a box top hat double dome sapphire crystal above the second hand on top of the cannon pinion. They could have used a flat sapphire crystal. The benefit of that is that would reduce the piece by 2mm from 15.5, which is excessive, down to 13.5, which would enhance comfort level and feel good factor. It would be less top heavy and more balanced, but nonetheless they've made that mistake. Now, you'll note that rather than printing Ball official standard and the brand emblem at 12 o'clock on the dial, and also the Alarmatic and also 100M 330 feet specification, they've printed it on the underside of the sapphire crystal. So it has AR coating on the underside of the sapphire crystal, and then they've printed the text on the underside. Why have they done that? Well, I'll explain. They can't print the dial with text. The reason is the center section of the dial is actually a black disc which rotates for the mechanical alarm complication. So it looks like it's got a 5th hand, but that's actually an alarm marker on the black disc. The disc rotates anti-clockwise through 360 degrees. Now, if they printed the Ball official standard brand emblem and logo, and also Alarmatic 100M 330 feet on the center black disc, of course when one sets the alarm complication, the disc rotates, and therefore that would rotate the logo and the specification. It would look incorrect. That's why they've done it. Now, I actually like that, and I think more brands should do that, printing the logo and the specification, such as the water resistance rating, on the underside of the sapphire crystal rather than the dial, because it appears to float above the dial. It's very aesthetically pleasing. Quality of the 24-hour scale for the GMT complication is beveled, rather like a chapter ring, and it's high definition crisp. The font is clearly legible. And inside, around the centre black disc, which rotates for the alarm complication, we've got black minute ticks. Legibility is good. Proportions of the 12, 9 and 6 Arabic numerals are excellent, and of course they are loomed with some of the 29 microgas tubes, which have tritium as the exciter. So, as an alternative to BGW9, or alternatively C3 Superluminova Nova, this piece uses tritium tubes. Now, as you can see, if you look at the 6 o'clock 6 Arabic numeral, you can see it has T Swiss made T, which is done in vintage pieces which were powered by tritium, to denote that tritium was used on the dial and hands, which of course was radioactive, and then succeeded by luminova, and then later superluminova, which we're all familiar with. But nice to see that vintage aesthetic of T Swiss made T as per vintage pieces from the 1960s and 1970s. So, bezel is a Coke bezel. It's black on the top portion and red on the lower portion, and it's ceramic and inlaid with C3 Superluminova, which is green. Arabic numerals are engraved with high definition crisp font. The legibility is good, and we've got squares which are engraved and inlaid with superluminova to a good standard. They've done a good job of infilling the engraving, and I like the tone of the black glossy top portion and the red glossy lower portion of it. It's a very well executed Coke bezel. Glossy finish is good, and subjectively one could argue it doesn't look as aesthetically pleasing as an aluminium bezel inset or sapphire bezel inset, but the benefit of ceramic of course is it's harder and more scratch resistant than aluminium. It would have a more vintage aesthetic if it used aluminium, but of course, a ceramic bezel insert is beneficial. It's not going to patinate or fade with time. Now, the bezel, case, bracelet and clasp are entirely made from 904L stainless steel versus the less expensive option, 316L grade stainless steel. Now, in terms of visual aesthetics, it's brushed satin finish throughout on the bezel, the case, the bracelet and the clasp. There's no discernible difference in terms of luster between 904L stainless steel, as used by Rolex. Rolex call it oyster steel, and 316L grade stainless steel. In terms of hardness, again, there's no additional benefit. Standard grade 316L and standard grade 904L both have similar 200 HV, 200 hardness Vickers hardness rating. It is possible to make the 316L and 904L harder, and it can have a hardness rating of 1200 HV, but Ball haven't done that. So in terms of visual aesthetics, there's no benefit, and in terms of scratch resistance, there's no benefit to it. It's just a more expensive material as used by Rolex, but good to see 904L used at this price point of €6,795 nonetheless. Brass satin finish to the top of the case. And I think this would benefit if they machined mirror polished bevels on the edges, the transitions, because it's just got a sharp, crisp edge. Now, it's not sharp to the touch, but the transitions could they could reduce the impact if they machined bevels, and that would make it more aesthetically pleasing. Brush satin finishing throughout does give it a tool watch aesthetic, but I think it would look more aesthetically pleasing if they mirror polished the flanks and also had mirror polished bevels, but this is just subjective. Vertical brush satin finishing to the flanks has a beautiful luster to it. Quality of the brush satin finishing is good. However, I think they've made an error here with regards to the lugs, because as you can see, they've used screw bars versus standard stainless steel spring bars or quick release stainless steel spring bars. This is a problem. The reason why it's negative is because these end links in the H-link bracelet are rather like integrated end links with the screw bars. Now, subjectively, one could argue, well, screw bars are higher quality. For example, they're used on high-tip pieces such as the Blancpain 50 Fathoms because they are more secure, they're more reliable and robust than spring bars. That's a given. The problem is they limit one's options. For example, one cannot exchange this H-link bracelet for an alternative rubber strap or leather strap because Ball don't offer it. You are stuck with the bracelet. Now, if this had a standard 20mm lug width with a standard end link, you could remove the spring bars and fit an alternative rubber or leather strap. Of course, that would be beneficial. The other mistake I think they've made is regard to the proportions, because we have a 41mm head of the piece. And with a 41, the industry standard is to use a 22mm lug width and a 22 to 18 taper. With a 39 or 40 case, 20mm lug width and the perfection personified 20 to 16 industry standard taper is the correct choice. But what we have here is rather odd, because we've got a 20mm lug width, which is undersized for a 41 case, and then we've got this flared bracelet, which has an aggressive taper from 24 to 18. The correct taper would be 22 to 18, and the correct lug width would be 22 versus 20. So lug width is too small, and the flared bracelet is too wide. So it looks like a contradiction, because it's an undersized lug width at 20, should be 22, and then the bracelet is too wide for a 41 case. It should be 22 to 18, but it's 24 to 18. So they've got the proportions wrong. Also, the lug to lug is extended from 48.5, which is correct, to a larger 54.3, which is too long, even for a large wrist size. Now, the problem is this piece is too thick, as I've detailed, 15.3. If they used a flat sapphire crystal, it would make it 13.5. 15.5 is excessive. It does wear top heavy, as I'll show you when we do the wrist shot. Now, bezel is 904L gear tooth profile, and it's ceramic bezel insert. So 24 clicks to it. So it's a GMT bidirectional bezel. It's not a 120 click unidirectional dive bezel, which is good for a GMT piece. Now, in terms of rotation, it feels the same clockwise and anti-clockwise. Nice, loud, audible clicks. No lateral side-to-side play. We don't need to check for back play because it's bidirectional versus unidirectional, but I like it doesn't have any play. Medium resistance to it. Clicking is provided by 4 ball bearings. So to explain the two methods, with a 120 click unidirectional bezel, as used on a dive piece, the resistance is provided, or the clicking is provided, by a click spring engaging with 120 grooves machined into the underside of the stainless steel bezel. With GMT bidirectional bezels like this that click 24 times, they have 4 ball bearings. So they drill 4 holes in the case, and then they sit 4 stainless steel springs in the 4 holes, one at 12, 9, 6 and 3, and then they sit ball bearings on top of the springs, and the springs push up against the ball bearings, and the ball bearings engage in the 24 grooves in the underside of the bidirectional bezel, and of course that gives you the 24 loud audible clicks. So it feels heavier than a 60 click bezel, feels heavier than a 120 click bezel. The clicks are heavier, they're more defined. But loud audible clicks sound good, they feel good. I like it, it feels good. Now, in terms of smoothness, it's not as smooth as a Rolex GMT Master 2. That has a better sensation to it. The resistance is the same in terms of it doesn't feel tighter or looser, but it just feels smoother. And that uses a similar system. It has 4 ball bearings, 12, 9, 6 and 3, and they're spring loaded with stainless steel springs. But the bidirectional bezel on a GMT Master 2 feels more refined. That's the point. This just doesn't feel as refined. It feels heavy, it feels reliable and robust. No back play in it. Clockwise and anti-clockwise, it doesn't feel sloppy, that's the point. When I'm referring to back play, I'm not talking about it being bidirectional. What I mean is each of the clicks clockwise and anti-clockwise. They don't have back play once it's engaged, so it's good. No lateral side-side play. Feels even through the 360 degrees, both clockwise and anti-clockwise. The problem is it's not very grippy, and it's difficult to get purchased because we've got these large gear tooth profiling to it rather than it being a knurled bezel or alternatively a coin edge bezel. I think they should have used a coin edge bezel because the coin edge bezel would look visually more aesthetically pleasing in 904L stainless steel, but also it would be more grippy. Point is, it would be easy to get good purchase with one's index finger and thumb. This is okay. Even with a gloved hand or a wet hand, you can get good purchase on it, but it's just not as tactile, it's not as grippy, it's not as easy to get good purchase on as a coin edge bezel or a scalloped bezel. Scalloped bezel as used on the GMT Master 2, coin edge bezel as used on the Tudor Black Bay, for example. So they could improve it because this gear tooth is just very slippy. The profiling, because of the large flats, that's the point. The other problem is the large diameter. This would be beneficial if they reduced it down to 41 as per the case diameter. 43.5 is too large because we've got overhang on the left and the right hand flanks, and it's 2.5 millimeters excessive overhang. The diameter is 2.5 more. Bezel looks too large for 41. Visually it has too much impact. They need to reduce the size of it. So we have two crowns. Now, top crown provides 100 meters. It's a screw down crown, knurled finish. Lower crown is a push pull crown. Now again, they've missed an opportunity here. The lower crown operates the alarm complication. The top crown operates the date complication, the time setting, the hacking, and also the GMT hour hand. So there's no reason why they shouldn't have used a screw down crown for the lower crown versus a push pull crown, because it only operates the alarm complication, and one could unscrew it, pull it out to operate the alarm complication, because one has to pull it out to set the alarm complication in any case. So it's not detrimental to have a screw down crown for the lower crown. It's really a production cost cutting measure in order to maximise profit margin per piece. That's the reality of it. They've used a push pull crown for the lower crown versus a screw down crown just to cut production costs. And one could be magnanimous if this were a low tier piece between €0 and €500. One has to be magnanimous about some production cost cutting, but this is a mid tier piece. €6,795. One cannot expect to see push pull crowns at this price point. Has to be a screw down crown on the top, screw down crown on the bottom. No excuses. But we'll test the crown execution nonetheless. So top crown is a screw down crown, knurled crown, solid 904L, and it's embossed rather than debossed or engraved with the ball emblem, double R's. Same again on the push pull crown for the lower crown. It's knurled and large chamfer, which deletes the tips of the knurled teeth. Now, it feels smooth, but it feels stiff. It doesn't feel rough or gritty, but it just has too much friction. To clarify, the friction is not caused by the interface of the internal thread on the crown and the external thread of the crown tube. I've reviewed over 500 pieces, from low tier to mid tier to high tier, and with experience, one can identify where the source of the friction is coming from. Sometimes friction on a screw down crown is caused by the meshing of the threads, the internal thread of the crown meshing with the external thread of the crown tube. It feels rough and gritty. You're all familiar with that feeling. This is not the case because it feels smooth. The excess friction is caused by the two hermetic seals. There are two rubber O-ring gasket seals. One rubber O-ring gasket inside the crown tube and a second rubber O-ring gasket seal inside the crown itself. So the rubber O-ring gasket inside the crown rubs against the end of the stainless steel crown tube. That's one source of friction. The other source of friction is the winding stem, which goes through the hole in the rubber O-ring gasket inside the stainless steel crown tube. The problem is these are both binding. So the winding stem is rubbing against the hole inside the rubber O-ring gasket inside the crown tube. That's one source of friction, which is excessive. Second source is the rubber O-ring gasket seal inside the crown is rubbing against the end of the crown tube, and cumulatively, when you add the two excess friction together, you get a stiff crown. So threading is good, feels smooth, but it's not silky smooth. It just feels stiff. That's the point I'm making. Pulling it out to the first click position is the quick set date complication. So when one rotates the knurled crown clockwise in the date setting position, you can see the date clicks over with a nice positive click. So doesn't feel as heavy as an NH35A, feels similar to an SW200-1, feels heavier than a 9015. The alignment is correct. Both the single and the double Arabic numerals align correctly in the date window. They're not too far to the left or the right, which is good. The font is high definition and crisp. It's clearly legible. I like the contrast of the black Arabic numerals contrasting with a white date wheel. And the 2.5 times magnification of the Cyclops magnifier is correct as per Rolex. It does a good job. So clearly legible, both the single and the doubles are easy to read. That's good. There is AR coating on the underside of the Cyclops magnifier as well as the sapphire crystal, so that improves the legibility. So it's good. Now, when you're in the date setting position, rotating the crown clockwise advances the date. When you rotate the crown anti-clockwise, it advances the skeletonized red GMT hour hand. And again, that clicks. So it's rather like the NH34A in terms of operation. Now, it doesn't have the heavy clicking sensation of the date complication, the GMT hour hand of an NH34A, but the clicks feel similar. So the alignment is similar. The skeletonized GMT hour hand can only rotate clockwise. That's something to note. You can't rotate it anti-clockwise. So if you go 1 hour too far, you can't rotate the crown the opposite way because that advances the date. It doesn't reverse the GMT hour hand. You can only rotate it clockwise through the 24 hours. That's something to be mindful of. So really it's very similar to the NH34A because the GMT hour hand on the NH34A is driven off the date complication. Same system with this ball caliber RRM 7379 automatic. Now, I like the clicking sensation. The alignment is correct. The skeletonized GMT hour hand has good legibility, but also the alignment is correct. It's bang on the center of each of the 24 hours for the second time zone. So it's not too far to the left or the right of the indices and the Arabic numerals. The alignment is bang on. So I like that. The quality control is good. That's the point I'm making. Pulling it out to the second click position hacks the movement. If you look at the needle second hand, you can see it's now stopped dead, so therefore it's possible to set the time precisely to the second with a caliber RRM 7379 automatic. We're now in the time setting position. Light resistance to it. Feels lighter than an NH35A. Feels similar to an SW200-1. Heavier than a 9015. I like the feeling of it. Feels smooth. Doesn't feel rough or gritty as per a PT5000. Light resistance, clockwise and anti-clockwise, feels exactly the same. But you can see, subjectively, the negative is you can only advance the GMT hour hand when you cycle through within minute and hour hand clockwise, same as the quick set. You can't rotate it anti-clockwise. So, for example, if you go 1 hour too far with a GMT hour hand, you can't cycle back through the 12 hours by rotating the minute and hour hand. You can only rotate the GMT hour hand clockwise only. That's something to note. Feels smooth, light resistance to it, and I like it. It feels refined. Now, as you can see, you can also move the GMT hour hand by cycling through the hour and minute hand, as one would expect. The thing I dislike about it is the amount of backplay. So to clarify, this has more backplay than an SW200-1 and a 9015 respectively. You have to take up a lot of slack in the gearing. When one rotates the knurled crown, there is significant backplay, and I dislike the amount of backplay. The other negative is, when you push back in the crown, sometimes when the winding stem enters the caliber, it causes the minute hand to jump out of position. So I'll just test it. Now there you can see the minute hand has jumped clockwise. Now I'm going to check it a couple more times because when I level criticism at a brand, I like to be fair rather than unfair. I like to be unbiased. This is something I've noticed with this caliber RRM 7379. Sometimes the minute hand jumps out of position, either clockwise or anti-clockwise. When the winding stem enters the caliber, the minute hand should always remain static every single time. But with this one, it doesn't always. So when I push it back in, it's jumped again clockwise. Now I'm just going to check it a couple more times. Now, when you take up the slack, you rotate the minute hand anti-clockwise and then you rotate it clockwise. So for example, I'm going to set it at 10 past 10. So anti-clockwise first, then I'm going to take up the slack, bring it up slowly clockwise to 10 past. When I push it back in, it should remain static. Now that time it did remain static, but the first two times it jumped clockwise. So I'm going to check it a couple more times for consistency. Static, one more time, jumped. So you can see there's inconsistency there. It's trial and error. Sometimes the minute hand remains static, as it should do, at bang on 10 past 10. Sometimes it jumps clockwise. That's not acceptable. One could be magnanimous if this were a low tier piece between €0 and €500, powered by a Seiko NH34A, for example. This is €6,795, and the ball caliber RRM 7379 automatic is an in-house caliber, and it is heavily complicated because we have a mechanical alarm complication, a GMT complication, date complication, hacking. So yes, it's heavily complicated, but there should not be this amount of backplay in it, and of course the minute hand should always remain static. It's jumped again. It's not acceptable. It's something I dislike about it, but it's just a characteristic of it. So let's test screwing the crown back down. Instant thread pickup, there's a perfect interface between the internal thread of the stainless steel crown and the external thread of the stainless steel crown tube, but it's difficult to get purchase on it because this 2.5mm of excess bezel overhang, because the bezel is 43.5, the case is 41 respectively, it obscures the bezel, it obscures the crown partially, so it's actually difficult to get a grip of it and then rotate, because this crown is always in the way because of the flat profiling to the gear tooth profile. So they should have reduced the bezel diameter down to 41 and ideally make it scalloped or alternatively coin edge finish rather than this aggressive gear tooth profiling. 43.5 is far too large for 41 head of the piece. But works well, albeit it does feel stiff, too much friction caused by the rubber O-ring gaskets as I've detailed. Now, lower crown, I'm going to have to take off my glove because, again, 43.5 is too large. Problem is, hard to get good purchase on it because with my index finger and thumb, it's hard to actually get a grip of it because this flat profile on the edge of the aggressive gear tooth bezel, it overhangs 2.5 diameter too much. And the problem is you can't actually get a grip of the lower crown to pull it out. It's slippy, it's not grippy, it's not tactile. This should be a coin edge crown with a coin edge bezel or a scalloped bezel with a knurled crown. This knurled crown is just too smooth. Now it's not a screw down crown, you can rotate it clockwise and anti-clockwise. This is for the alarm complication. The only way to pull it out is to prise your index fingernail or thumbnail underneath it. And we're now in the alarm complication. Now, this is a four-hander watch. So to remind you, we have a minute hand, hour hand, second hand on the cannon pinion. We also have a GMT hour hand, which is skeletonized, so four-hand piece. If you look at the disc in the center of the dial, it looks like a fifth hand, but it's actually not a hand. It's a marker, which is on a black rotating disc. The disc rotates 360 degrees anti-clockwise. So when you rotate the lower crown anti-clockwise, it makes the disc rotate anti-clockwise. And you can see the marker on it, which looks like a fifth hand, rotates anti-clockwise only. When one rotates the crown clockwise, it has negligible effect. It doesn't make the disc rotate clockwise. So that's something to note. You cannot rotate the marker for the mechanical alarm complication clockwise. You can only rotate it anti-clockwise. So this has a chiming function to the alarm. So when I rotate the marker to the hour hand, it will now chime for 18 seconds maximum. There we are. Now I'm just going to move it up to the microphone. That's how it sounds. It's loud and audible. So the chime, as they call it, has a buzzing sound. And you can set it accurately to plus or minus 5 minutes on the hour. So you can get it accurate to plus or minus 5 minutes. So for example, if you set it at 12 o'clock, the alarm could go off at 5 to 12 or 5 past. It's only accurate to plus or minus 5 minutes. That's something to note. You can't precisely set it at 12 o'clock. It will go off at 5 to or 5 past, somewhere between the two. But when it does chime, and I'll do it again so you can hear it, it goes on for 18 seconds and then it will stop. There we are. So it runs for 18 seconds and the chime automatically stops. There we are. So that's what it sounds like. But setting it, you rotate the lower crown anti-clockwise and then you simply bring it up to the hour that you want it to go off, and then it will chime. So that's how you set it. But when you rotate the crown clockwise, it has a negligible effect. So you have to be careful not to go too far anti-clockwise, then you'll have to cycle through the full 12 hours again. Works well, easy to set, and it's intuitive once you become accustomed to it. Pushing it back in, it's got a nice positive click that reinstates the 100 metres of hermetic seal. But it's a production cost cutting measure. They didn't use a screw down crown for the top crown and a screw down crown for the lower crown. This is a production cost cutting measure in order to maximise profit margin per piece. One could be magnanimous if it were a low tier piece, but with a mid tier piece at 6,795, it has to be 2 screw down crowns. That's just the mandatory specification. So let's look at the exhibition case back in detail. Screw down exhibition case back, glazed with sapphire crystal. I like the large diameter of the sapphire crystal glazing, does a good job of displaying the calibre, which is the RRM 7379. The stainless steel portion of it is 904L stainless steel, and it's dodecagon or 10-sided flats to it rather than being hexagonal, alternatively octagonal. Now, as an alternative to milled slots, they've drilled holes, and the holes are deburred, so no sharp edges. Specification, serial number, reference number of the piece are engraved, and as I've detailed, this is a limited edition of 333 numbered pieces. Good to see a large diameter sapphire crystal glazing because this is perfectly flat. Now, what I like about it is it's a very flat case back. It's not a deep bubble back case back. And the benefit of that is this enhances comfort level and feel good factor. 100 metres of hermetic seal is perfectly acceptable. Does a good job of displaying the calibre, which has beautiful pelage finishing on the main plate, and the decorated rotor, which is signed. So, I like they've minimalised the 904L stainless steel portion of it. The inner diameter has been enlarged, and therefore they've enlarged the diameter or the proportion of the sapphire crystal glazing to the absolute maximum, and it is perfectly smooth and flat, so it does feel very comfortable to wear for long periods of time, such as 8 to 12 hours per day. Underside to the head of the piece is concentric CNC lathe tool machined, 4 large bevels machined to the tips of the lugs that deletes the sharp corners. And the concentric CNC lathe tool machining to the underside has a beautiful lustre, it refracts the light. Large mirror polished bevels to the undercuts to the flanks on both the left and the right hand flank. They've mirror polished the bevels on the undercuts to the flanks, which is good. This enhances comfort level and feel good factor, but you can see the negative of them using screw bars versus quick release stainless steel spring bars here, because as I've detailed, one could argue they're more robust and reliable as per the Blancpain 50 Fathoms, but you are now stuck with this H-link bracelet because there isn't an alternative leather or rubber strap included, and I think it would have been better if they used female pivoted end links and simply use spring bars, because then with a 22mm lug width versus this erroneous 20, you could simply fit alternative 20 or 22 straps as an alternative. I don't think screw bars really are beneficial. Quick release stainless steel spring bars are secure enough. Now let's check the bracelet articulation. Female pivoted end links, well, they look like female pivoted end links, but in reality they don't articulate very much. They look like integrated end links due to the screw bars versus spring bars. What they've done is they've made an error with the profiling. They've extended these end links for some reason, aesthetic reasons, but it doesn't actually enhance comfort level or feel good factor because the lug to lug of the case is good. It's only 0.5 above the 48 sweet spot. The lug to lug of the case is 48.5, but they've extended it to 54.3 with these long end links, and that's detrimental, as I'll show you in the wrist shots. So the problem is the rectangle in the centre doesn't pivot as per a Black Bay or Black Bay 58, and the problem is one doesn't get the benefit of this rectangle. They could have made it a standard end link with spring bars and female pivoted end links. But let's check the articulation of the H-link in the bracelet. H-link articulates freely, doesn't feel stiff or kink, doesn't have excess longitudinal, lateral, side-to-side play, so interference friction fit tolerances are good. Beautiful lustre to the 904L stainless steel, to the top side, underside and flanks, and they've got vertical brush satin finishing to the flanks, which matches the vertical brush satin finishing to the flanks of the head of the piece, so that's good. Large bevels, which delete the sharp edge on the top edge, so there's no sharp edges to the top edge or the low edge. No, this doesn't scratch the wrist, doesn't pull arm hairs. Let's check the articulation. Fluid bracelet, articulates freely, doesn't feel stiff or kink, doesn't feel sloppy, doesn't rattle. It's good. Let's check the other side. Again, they've missed the opportunity. This could be a standard female pivoted end link, but you can see one doesn't get the benefits. It just doesn't have the clearance needed to make this rectangle in the centre pivot. So the problem is this end link in the H-link bracelet is never going to articulate, it's never going to pivot beneath the lugs of the case, and it's not going to give a good fit as a result. But articulates freely, doesn't have excess play, beautiful lustre to it. There's no discernible difference in terms of 904L, which is like Rolex Oyster Steel, or 316L, when it's brushed satin finished to this high quality lustre. Doesn't look more silver or dull grey anthracite as per grade 5 titanium. The lustre is the same between 316L and 904L respectively. Articulates freely, doesn't feel stiff or kink, doesn't have excess play, isn't sloppy, doesn't pull arm hairs, no sharp edge to the top edge or the low edge. So it's well finished, and I'm pleased to see 1.2mm screw pins used versus the production cost cutting measure of push pins, which would be unacceptable at this price point. 2-button push butterfly clasp. Opens freely. 2 button push triggers are heavily sprung loaded. Solid milled 904L stainless steel. No sharp corners to the internals. No sharp edges to the undercuts to the flanks. Let's check the hinge pins. Left hand outer hinge pin articulates freely, doesn't feel stiff or kink, doesn't have excess play. Left hand inner hinge pin articulates freely, doesn't feel stiff or kink, doesn't have excess play. Right hand inner hinge pin articulates freely, doesn't have excess play. Finally, right hand outer hinge pin articulates freely, doesn't feel stiff or kink, doesn't have excess play. Excellent. All 4 hinge pins, left hand outer, left hand inner, right hand outer, have perfect interference friction fits. No sharp edges, beautiful luster to it, snaps shut with a nice positive click. Both the left and right hand portions, opens freely. But, however, this really could be enhanced with a micro adjustment clasp with 10mm on the fly adjustment. The problem with this butterfly clasp, and the same applies to all butterfly clasps, is there are no half links. This would be beneficial if they added a half link on the 6 and a half link on the 12 o'clock side of the butterfly clasp, because sometimes adding or subtracting one full link from an H-link bracelet doesn't give the desired fit. The bracelet either feels slightly too tight or too loose. The other problem is it makes the butterfly clasp, the 2 triggers on the flanks, sit off centre, too far to the 6 or too far to the 12 side respectively. By having a half link either side, if one has to remove one link, you can remove a half link plus a half link to make the one link on the 6 and the 12 side. That makes the clasp sit centrally on the wrist rather than offset. The 2 button push triggers are bang on the centre. Alternatively, a better option would be a micro adjustment ratcheting mechanism clasp with 10mm on the fly adjustment, because this is a daily wear piece. It's a GMT piece with a mechanical alarm complication and a date complication. Therefore, a ratcheting micro adjustment clasp would suit the H-link bracelet, and at this price point it really should be mandatory. It's a disappointment to use a butterfly clasp. Butterfly clasps are okay on dress pieces or daily wear pieces or leather strap or rubber strap pieces, but H-link bracelets really do benefit from a micro adjustment clasp, or alternatively a flip lock clasp like a dive watch, versus a 2 button push butterfly clasp for the aforementioned reasons. Right, so I'll give you a wrist shot, just bear with me. I'll remove my Concord 40 and then I'll continue. Now, I haven't sized the bracelet, so let's see how it fits on my 8-inch wrist. Now, on a positive note, there are enough links in the bracelet to fit my large 8-inch wrist. And snap shut with a nice positive click. Now, I haven't sized it, and I can just slide an index finger beneath the bracelet and clasp at all times, but it is tight. 8 inches is the maximum. There are enough removable links on the 6 o'clock and the 12 o'clock side of the bracelet to size this down to a 6-inch wrist size up to a maximum 8-inch wrist size. Aggressive taper, 24 flared down to 18. It's incorrect. So to clarify, the reason why I say it's incorrect, there are 2 industry standards. For smaller pieces, 38-39, 20 to 16 perfection personified taper is one industry standard. For larger pieces, 40, 41, 42, 22 to 18 is the alternative. This doesn't use either, because what we have is a 20mm lug width, so one would expect a 20 to 16 taper, but it doesn't have it. We have a 20mm lug width, but a 24 to 18 odd taper. The alternative would be a 22mm lug width, which would be correct for 41 head of the piece, with a 22 to 18 industry standard taper. What we've got here is a mix of the two. 20mm lug width, 24 to 18. It should be 22 with 22 to 18, or alternatively 20 with 20 to 16, respectively. So, mistake. The other problem is, for some reason, and I think it's aesthetic reasons, but it doesn't actually look aesthetically pleasing, they've made these end links rather long. 48.5 head of the piece was actually correct, and they've actually made a mistake here, because the lug to lug is 48.5. It's only 0.5 above the 48 sweet spot, which you'll know from my previous reviews is the perfect lug to lug, regardless of whether a head of the piece is 39, 40, 41. But what they've then done is they've added these rather long profiled end links to make it like an integrated lug, and these screw bars are not beneficial, but we've got these large integrated end links in the H-link bracelet, which could be a female put end link, but they've missed that opportunity. And now it's extended the lug to lug far too long, even on my large 8-inch wrist, 54.3, way too long. Now you can see the problem with it. We have this large gap beneath the tips of the lugs, and because we don't have female put end links that pivot, We now have this permanent gap, even on my large 8-inch wrist. The case is now too long because of the effective lug-to-lug caused by the long end links, and we've now permanently got a gap beneath the tips of the lugs, which overhang too far, and we've also got this gap underneath the 6 and the 12 o'clock side of the bracelet. So this piece never sits on the wrist, it sits on top of the wrist, it doesn't curve around it, because you can now see the end links come out at an angle, but then the H-link bracelet drops vertically. It just looks dreadful from every angle. You can see it bulges out at the head of the piece, but then it drops vertically because it can't pivot. This rectangle in the centre should pivot like a female upwards end link used on the Black Bay or the Black Bay 58 that you're all familiar with. But you can now see only the H-link can pivot. This rectangle should be able to pivot, and that would close up the gap. Had they used regular 22mm end links with an H-link bracelet with female pitted end links, that would correct the errors here. And they've got it wrong. And it's dreadful, as you can see. Fit is abhorrent, large gap beneath the tips of the lugs, large gap, the end links can't articulate. And this 54.3 is far too long, even on my large 8-inch wrist. And yes, it is a large piece at 41. But had they kept to the 48.5 actual case lug to lug, that would have fitted better. Can you imagine if this had a 48.5 lug to lug, which it does do, and female pitted end links? Standard 22mm end links with spring bars versus these screw bars. The fit would be so much better. Comfort level and feel good factor, because as it stands, the end link bulges out. And it just looks dreadful from every angle. Then it's compounded by this aggressive taper. 24 is far too wide. They should have just used a 22mm lug width and a 22 to 18 taper. That would look better. This has a far too aggressive taper. It's too wide. 24 is too wide at the lugs, and then it looks too slender then at the clasp because it's 18. Should be 22 to 18 or alternatively 20 to 16. Just doesn't look right. Lugs look too wide. The bracelet looks too wide. The lug width is undersized. It should be 22. It's only 20. 24 flared bracelet on a 20 lug width is dreadful looking. But that's the way they've done it. Wrist presence dominates the wrist, as one would expect. Now, it's a 41 head of the piece, but to remind you, the bezel is oversized. It's 43.5. So it actually looks and feels like a 43. Due to the bezel diameter being 43.5, the bezel is 2.5 diameter larger than the case. This is another mistake. The bezel should be coin edge or scalloped, and it should be 41 to match the 41 case. This gear tooth bezel is too aggressive profile, the flats are too long and large, and the problem with it is visually there's too much impact. 43.5 bezel makes the piece look like a 43 case, but it's not, it's 41. Proportions of this piece are mistake after mistake, not only the lug width but also the bezel diameter. Should be a 41 bezel on a 41 head of the piece. But that's the way it looks. So it does dominate the wrist. So straight away I'd say if you have a 6 to 7 inch wrist, you can rule this piece out because far too large. The other problem is the main negative I want you to be mindful of. This is far too thick. 15.5. Now of course one has to be magnanimous. It does have a 2mm box top hat crystal. But the case back is flat, so the thickness is not caused by the case or the case back. It's only 100 metres. We're not looking at a dive piece with 200 or 300 metres. So the thickness is not caused by the case, it's not caused by the case back. It's purely caused by this thick box top hat crystal. And there's no need for it for a four-handed GMT piece. They could have used a flat sapphire crystal, which would have been 2mm thinner. That would have reduced this from 15.5, which is excessive, down to 13.5. Now, yes, 13.5 would still be 0.5 above the 13 sweet spot, but it would be far better. Comfort level and feel good factor would be enhanced. You know this from my previous reviews. 13mm and below is the sweet spot for a piece to easily slip underneath a shirt cuff. At 15.5, needless to say, this is not easily going to slip underneath a shirt cuff. It is 2.5mm too tall. Doesn't have slab-sided flanks as per Tudor Black Bay. That's not the problem. The thickness of the case. The bezel is not too tall. That's not the problem. It's purely down to the 2mm box top hat crystal with a fillet edge. Should be a flat sapphire crystal. It's just far too thick. 15.5, and it looks and feels like a 43.5 because the bezel is 2.5 diameter too large. Dreadful proportions. Feel good factor and comfort level are therefore diminished. There's one other problem with this piece. 188 grams. This is 38 grams in excess of the 150 gram sweet spot. 150 grams is the sweet spot, regardless of whether a piece is 39, 40 or 41. And this is actually a 41, although visually it looks like a 43.5. This should be circa 150 to a maximum of 165 grams, even with an H-link bracelet with a large 24 to 18 taper, because it doesn't have a micro adjustment clasp. We only have a butterfly clasp. So the clasp doesn't add additional heft. The heft is excess due to the bracelet having too much meat. 24 is far too wide. This adds 15 to 20 grams of excess heft on the 6 and the 12 o'clock side. If this used a 20 to 16 or a 22 to 18, that would reduce this by 15 to 20 grams. And that's where the meat's coming from. It's not the case, the bezel or the case back. The bracelet is far too large. So, far too heavy, it's 188 grams. Overall, it feels like a very heavy piece. It's 38 grams too heavy. And yes, it is a 41. One has to expect some heft, but the maximum this should be in a 41 size with an H-link bracelet and a butterfly clasp should be 165 grams. 188. 38 grams far too heavy. The problem is it doesn't feel balanced, even though it has a wide bracelet. It feels like a thick slab of 316L grade stainless steel, and of course looks heavy and feels heavy because it's 15.5 versus 13 or 13.5. If this had a 22 to 18 taper and it were only 13 or 13.5, yes, then it would be balanced. Visually, it would have less impact, and also comfort level would be enhanced, feel good factor would be enhanced. Just looks like a very large piece and just doesn't wear well because of this gap you can see and the way the end link bulges out and then the bracelet drops vertically. So mistake after mistake after mistake. Right, let's do a loom test and then we'll see how the loom performs when it's charged up to the absolute maximum. Now I say charged up. Tritium tubes are not charged up by ultraviolet light as per superluminova. The potency of the exciter is permanent because tritium is the exciter. It's radioactive and therefore it permanently emits, regardless of whether there's UV light or not. But nonetheless, ball included a UV torch. But what I'm going to do, because this does have C3 superluminova on the ceramic bezel insert, I'm going to charge it anyway. So as always, I'm going to use my 100 UV LED torch to charge it up to the absolute peak. Right, so you can see the tritium tubes are not charged by ultraviolet light because there are 29 gas-filled tubes, which are, on this case, the classic version, green and yellow, respectively. And I'll shine the UV LEDs on them so to make the exciter shine. But you can see, on the ceramic bezel inserts, we have 5 to 6 layers of C3 superluminova. So now when I shine the UV torch, you can now see the tritium tubes. There are 29 tritium tubes which glow green and yellow, but when I apply the UV light, they actually appear to glow green and orange, but Ball specified that they should glow green and yellow. The rainbow version, which is the alternative, has 29 gas-filled tubes which are loomed with tritium and they glow in rainbow colours. This is the alternative classic version with green and yellow, but actually it looks more like green and orange respectively. But you can see 29 tubes, so the 12, 9 and 6 Arabic numerals have tritium tubes, and then the indices, or as an alternative to indices, the tubes for the other hour markers are infilled with tritium. They're gas filled. The skeletonized GMT hour hand isn't loomed. That's a shame. It would be better. Well, it actually does have loom on the tip of it, so apologies for the mistake. The alarm complication, I won't say hand, but the disc has an orange marker for it, and of course that's legible, so that's good. And on the hour and minute hand we have green tubes, so it's good because it's easy to differentiate between the green tip or yellow tip, you could say, of the skeletonized GMT hour hand, the orange marker for the alarm, and then the tubes on the hour and minute hand. The minute hand has a longer tube, which is good because you can identify which is the minute, which is the hour. But let's get back to the bezel because I want to check the potency of the exciter on the ceramic bezel insert specifically. So as you can see, when I remove the UV light or UV charge, only the C3 superluminova on the bezel glows in the dark. So Arabic numerals are clearly legible. They've done a good job of engraving and filling a full 5 to 6 layers, and then the dots which are engraved for the other hour markers are also good. So potency of the exciter is good. Nice even application. In daylight, the Arabic numerals look white, not cream. And in the dark, they glow green. So good 5 to 6 layers on the ceramic bezel insert. They deserve credit. But you can see tritium tubes are not charged by ultraviolet light. However, when I shine ultraviolet light, which is why Ball include the torch with LEDs, which are ultraviolet LEDs, it does actually make the tritium exciter shine or excite. So good application. Now, in terms of the tritium tubes, they do perform well. You can see the 12, 9 and 6 Arabic numerals are clearly legible, the hour markers are clearly legible, and the handset tritium tubes are also legible. They've done a good job, and they've managed to fit in a small tritium tube to the right of the date complication, which is good. So, although it's an asymmetrical dial versus symmetrical due to the date complication at 3, the legibility is good, and one could argue that tritium tubes perform better than C3 or BGW9, but it really comes down to your personal taste, whether you prefer tritium or whether you prefer superluminova. I think this would look better if it were fully loomed with BGW9 in blue on the bezel, the dial and the hands, alternatively C3 superluminova, but that's just what Ball use. They use tritium tubes, which are gas-filled, 29 of them. So one has the option of rainbow coloured tubes, alternatively classic, which is this version, which is meant to be green and yellow, but as you can see, it actually looks more like orange and green, but that's what it looks like when it's charged up or when the UV light shone on it. So good performance to the bezel, and I'm pleased to see no cost-cutting measures. Right, so let's discuss the movement use because it's my favourite aspect of the piece. So heavily complicated. This is powered by the Ball calibre RRM 7379, which is an in-house calibre. The main plate is decorated with pelage finishing. Now, there are no blued screws, which is disappointing because this grade of calibre, one would expect blued screws. They've done a good job of decorating the main plates with pelage. The rotor is signed with Ball Watch Company and the brand emblem, which is good. So, good looking movements. Now, it's in terms of specification, 31 joules, it runs at 28,800 vibrations per hour and a frequency of 4 Hz. Has hand winding and hacking, which are used for complications, and they work correctly as I've demonstrated. Quickset date complication, quickset GMT complication, alarmatic mechanical alarm complication, 40-hour power reserve is perfectly acceptable, chronometer accurate, regulated in 5 positions to -4 to +6. Now, it's not COSC chronometer certified, but I can clarify, Ball do regulate the calibers to chronometer limits of -4 to +6 in 5 positions. This one is running consistently at +4 seconds per day. +4 is well within the stated -4 to +6. So excellent chronometer accuracy. 40 hours is perfectly acceptable. Hand winding and hacking work well. GMT complication works well. Date complication works well. No negatives whatsoever. The only negative subjectively is manually winding it feels stiff, but that's not due to the calibre, that's due to the rubber O-ring gasket seals inside the crown tube and the crown respectively. So I'm not going to level criticism at the calibre itself due to that. It's a technically excellent calibre due to it being highly complicated, and one has to respect it does have a mechanical alarm complication. And although it is a thick calibre, this piece doesn't need to be 15.3. Yes, it is a thicker calibre due to the GMT complication and the alarm complication added to it, but this could be housed in a 13mm thick piece, or certainly 13.5. So I'm going to level criticism at Ball here for the thickness of the piece due to the box top hat crystal, which is 2mm thick. This should be 13 to 13.5, that's the point I'm making. With 100 metres, it's not a 200 or 300 metre dive piece, it's a GMT piece with alarm complication. 13 to 13.5 is the sweet spot. The calibre isn't so thick it needs the additional clearance because the hand stack height, albeit it does have 4 hands, not 3, it doesn't need such clearance. This is poor tolerance from Ball. So the calibre isn't so thick, but they've provided too much clearance on the sapphire crystal glazing on the exhibition case back. They could reduce it by 0.5 millimetre. They could reduce it by another 2mm by making it flat sapphire crystal versus box top hat. That would reduce it by 2.5, so that would bring it down from 15.5 down to 13, which is the sweet spot. That's what they need to do. I'd like to see a V2 version of this with a flat sapphire crystal and reducing the clearance between the rotor and the sapphire crystal by 0.5 millimetre. That could reduce this by 2.5. But calibre is good. Reliability is well proven, and I like it. It's, in terms of the alarm complication, works well. It's got a nice loud audible chime, and it's intuitive. That's the point. It's easy to operate. The GMT complication is intuitive, the date complication is intuitive, and the alarm complication is intuitive. Even without reading an owner's instruction manual, it's easy to work out how it all works. Off the top crown and the lower crown, one doesn't need to read an owner's instruction manual. So I like the fact the movement is intuitive, it's not complicated in terms of operation, but it's just a shame there's too much friction on the crowns, and also it's a shame there's only a screw down crown operating the alarm. A push-pull crown, it should be a screw down crown. So last I'll summarise the piece. What do I think of it overall? Well, when I'm considering reviewing a watch for my channel, the watch meet 2 criteria. It should be both excellent quality and excellent value at the respective price point. So mid-tier piece, this is €6,795. Difficult piece to weigh up, because one could say on one hand the specification is loaded, because we have tritium tubes, 29 tritium tubes, micro gas tubes, also ceramic bezel insert is fully loomed, AR coating, and of course we have 904L versus 316L throughout. So that adds value to the piece, and one can extend the 4-year international warranty to 5. 5 years of international warranty is generally seen on €10,000+ high-tier pieces such as Rolex. Mid-tier pieces usually only have 2 years of warranty, so 5 years of warranty does add value. One has to factor in all of those things. Also, one also has to factor in the brand heritage since 1891, which again adds value. But there are things that downgrade this piece. The errors in the dimensions of the end links and also the diameter of the bezel itself being incorrect. The lack of a screw down crown for the lower crown downgrades the piece, and again the lack of a micro adjustment clasp, butterfly clasp I consider to be a production cost cutting measure. These are the things that downgrade it at this price point, €6,795. So I'm going to declare it good quality, but I'm not going to declare it excellent quality, and I'm going to declare the value as okay. I'm not going to say good or excellent, because this does face some stiff competition in the mid-tier. The truth is, there are equal specification and equal or better quality pieces at €6,795 or below. This is competing with brands such as Tudor, and Tudor with a Black Bay GMT, for example, is similar. Now, it doesn't have a mechanical alarm complication, but it does have a better power reserve. One could argue that the loom used, BGW9 Superloom Nova, is equal in performance to the tritium tubes, but the point is it's a GMT complication piece, and some things about it are better, such as the female pitted end links. It's a less expensive piece, that's the point I'm making. So there are alternatives in the mid-tier. Swiss-made pieces, brands that do have heritage, such as Tudor with a Black Bay. So that's what this is going up against. Less expensive pieces. Okay, they don't have an alarm complication. They don't have an in-house caliber, because, strictly speaking, the Black Bay GMT uses a Knissi movement. It's not actually made by Tudor, but the point I'm making is it's less expensive, so the value is better. So I'm going to declare it good quality, and I'm going to declare the value as okay, but I'm not going to say good value and good quality, and I'm not going to say excellent quality and excellent value. I'm going to recommend it to your consideration, but bear in mind the shortcomings. I hope you've enjoyed my review of the Ball Roadmaster M Model A Classic version. Please feel free to post your own comments below the video. Thank you for watching.